5 years ago, Rachel got into a car accident while trying to save her family and became comatose. 5 years later, when she finally woke up, she found everything had changed. There was an adopted daughter, Molly, by the side of my parents and brother. They doted on Molly excessively. Even her childhood friend and fiancé Dylan, who had grown up with Rachel, regarded her differently. They said it was because they missed Rachel too much that they adopted her. But Rachel couldn't stand it and insisted they send Molly away. Who would have thought that on the way to send Molly, there was a car accident, and both parents and Molly died on the spot. From then on, Elwyn and Dylan developed hatred for Rachel out of love. They said if she hadn't forcibly sent away Molly, 3 lives wouldn't have been lost at once. They tormented her, took revenge on her, and she willingly accepted the atonement. 3 years later, they had left her physically and emotionally broken, until she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctor said she wouldn't live past a month, but when she stumbled past a hotel in a daze, she saw her deceased parents, brother, and Dylan gathered around a table, celebrating Molly's birthday. Molly wore a crown, smiling like a true princess, and she stood outside the door, thunderstruck. Before she could react, she heard Dylan ask Elwyn, "Rachel has learned her lesson. How long will this act continue?" Elwyn smiled and said, "Let's wait until her birthday a month later to tell her the truth. Let her suffer a bit more pain and learn her lesson, so she won't dare to drive Molly away again." Mother sighed. "Yes, this girl is too stubborn. If we don't let her suffer a bit, she'll never learn to accept Molly." Father nodded in agreement. "After we fake our deaths this time, she definitely won't dare to target Molly anymore." At that moment, she stood outside the door, feeling her blood run cold. So it was all a scam. They never died at all. They faked their deaths just to force her to accept Molly, making her endure all that pain. How laughable. Her dearest parents, brother, and even Dylan, who promised to love her forever, played her like a fool, all for an adopted daughter. But they had no idea, she had less than a month left to live. She wouldn't live to see their mercy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. The scene inside was full of joy. Rachel could no longer bear to watch. Staggering, she fled the hotel, her mind flooded with nightmares from the past 3 years. Every single day of those 3 years had been spent drowning in self-blame. She dreamed countless times of that burning car, of her parents screaming for help in the flames, of Molly's eyes filled with terror. So she endured all the punishments from Dylan and Elwyn. She endured Dylan choking her day and night, saying, "You killed them." She endured Elwyn forcing her to kneel in the morning hall for 3 days and nights. She endured their punishment of copying "I was wrong" repeatedly until her fingers bled. Yet in the end, it was all just a lie. Crushed, she ran home and vomited a mouthful of blood the moment she stepped inside. In the bathroom, she slumped over the toilet as blood mingled with tears continued to pour out. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for painkillers and swallowed them. Just as she washed away the bloodstains, the door was violently pushed open. "I've been calling you for so long with no response. Who are you pretending to be dead for?" Elwyn stood coldly at the doorway, his face stern, trying to escape today's atonement again. Dylan also frowned at her. "What are you doing crouching on the floor?" Rachel didn't answer, only raising her head numbly. "How do you want me to atone today?" The 2 men exchanged glances. Dylan said calmly, "Going to the north side of town to buy Osmanthus cakes for Shirley." Rachel twitched her lips and laughed aloud. Shirley. It was 1 month after Molly died when Dylan and Elwyn brought back this woman who looked almost identical to Molly. Back then, she naively thought they had simply found a substitute to ease their grief. Only now did she realize. What substitute? That was clearly Molly who never died. They couldn't even be bothered to change the name, just reversed Molly into Shirley. "Alright, I'll go." Rachel had no energy left to argue. She was dying soon anyway, none of it mattered anymore. The Osmanthus cakes from the north side of town required a 2-hour wait in line. She stood weakly under the scorching sun, her vision darkening in waves. The first time she brought them back, Shirley complained, "They're cold." The second time, she said, "Too sweet." The third time, she said, "The shape isn't pretty." The 7th time, she finally bought the perfect Osmanthus cake, only to be hit by an electric scooter on her way back. The perpetrator fled the scene, leaving her to limp home with blooded legs. "Your Osmanthus cake." Rachel handed the bag to Shirley. "Ah." Shirley screamed in terror upon opening the box. "Blood. There's blood." Dylan and Elwyn rushed over at the sound. The moment the door opened, Shirley threw herself into their arms with tear-filled eyes and sobbed, "Woo-woo, brother Dylan, brother Elwyn, if she didn't want to buy it for me, she could have just said so. Why did she have to disgust me with bloody cakes?" Dylan and Elwyn turned grim instantly at the sight of the Osmanthus cake stained with blood. "Did you do this on purpose?" Dylan demanded coldly. Rachel leaned weakly against the wall, her legs still aching faintly from the car accident. "No, on my way back. I was hit by an electric scooter. the blood got on it by accident. Car accident, Elwyn sneered, striding forward. Do you take me for a fool? If you'd been in an accident, how could you be standing here completely unharmed? He grabbed Rachel's wrist tightly. Since you love lying so much, today I'll make your lies come true. Someone, drag her to the lawn. 2 bodyguards immediately seized Rachel from both sides, dragging her to the backyard lawn like livestock. Her knees were scraped bloody on the cobblestone path, but no one cared. In the center of the lawn, Dylan and Elwyn were already seated in the black Maybach. The engines roar like the whisper of death. Dylan, Elwyn, she struggled to prop herself up. Before the words were finished, the car had already accelerated and charged forward. Bang! Excruciating pain exploded through every limb. Rachel was sent flying like a rag doll, landing heavily on the grass several meters away. Blood gushed from her mouth as her vision darkened in waves, and she completely lost consciousness. After what felt like an eternity, Rachel's awareness gradually returned, the stinging scent of disinfectant burning her nostrils. She struggled to open her eyes, the blinding white light of the ceiling lamp making her dizzy in her blurred vision. How could there be so much blood? Dylan's hushed voice came from outside the ward. We barely tapped her with the car. Yeah, Elwyn's voice carried disbelief. We definitely controlled the impact. The doctor's weary sigh followed. The patient was already in the late stages of cancer, with severe metastasis. A collision like yours only accelerated her death. Rachel's heart suddenly clenched tight. She had originally wanted to keep her cancer diagnosis from them, but now, the doctor's words had already reached their ears. She quietly gripped the sheets, her fingertips turning white, as a pitiful glimmer of anticipation rose in her heart. How would they react now that they knew? Will you regret it? Will it ache your heart? Will you embrace her tenderly as before, saying, Rachel, don't be afraid, ding-ling-ling. The abrupt ringing of the telephone interrupted the doctor's explanation. Dylan answered the phone to hear Shirley's tearful voice. Dylan, I fell down and it hurts so much. Dylan's expression changed instantly. I'll be right there. Without another thought, they hastily told the doctor, arrange for a nurse to take care of her, use the best medicine, and replenish the blood she's lost. With that, they turned and left without looking back. The doctor opened his mouth, wanting to call them back, but the two had already disappeared swiftly down the corridor. He sighed, entered the ward, and said to Rachel, Miss Rachel, your condition is already at an advanced stage of cancer. You must be hospitalized for chemotherapy as soon as possible. After a pause, he added, Mr. Dylan and Mr. Elwyn didn't seem to fully grasp the specifics just now. Would you like to tell them yourself, so they can spend this final time with you properly? Rachel smiled bitterly, tears silently streaming down her face. No need, they don't care. The doctor hesitated to speak, but in the end could only shake his head and leave. In the following days, Rachel was in excruciating pain. The painkillers were becoming less and less effective. She curled up on the hospital bed, her sweat soaking through the patient gown. But just at this moment, Dylan and Elwyn's call came through. It's just a minor injury. How much longer are you going to stay there? The voice on the other end was cold as ice. Your atonement isn't finished yet. Come back immediately. Rachel held the phone, her fingertips trembling. She knew they just wanted to seize every moment to torment her. Fine, then torment me. She was also curious to know what expression they would wear when she was tortured beyond recognition, reduced to a cold corpse. She voluntarily completed the discharge procedures, collected a large amount of painkillers, and returned alone to that so-called home. But the moment she stepped into the villa, a servant stopped her. Miss Rachel, Mr. Dylan and Mr. Elwyn have given orders. After staying in the hospital for so many days, you must be carrying countless bacteria and viruses. To prevent infecting Miss Shirley, you must be disinfected first. Before she could react, several servants grabbed her and threw her directly into the disinfection pool. The disinfectant stung the unhealed wound. Rachel convulsed in pain as blood seeped from the torn flesh, staining the entire pool red. The maid screamed in fright and rushed to call Dylan and Elwyn. Dylan charged over to find Rachel already delirious with pain, her pale face drenched in cold sweat, lips bitten bloody. His pupils contracted violently as he instinctively reached out to pull her from the water. Dylan, Elwyn grabbed his wrist and lowered his voice. Have you forgotten our plan? Dylan's hand froze mid-air. I know you like her. Elwyn stared at him, his voice chillingly calm. But there's only 1 month left. Only by making her learn her lesson thoroughly will she dare not hurt Molly again. He paused, softening his tone. I'm her own brother. It pains me too. But for Molly, we must be cruel. Dylan's fingers trembled slightly before ultimately withdrawing slowly. Rachel lay soaked in bloody water, her blurred vision capturing only their retreating figures. How laughable. She was dying, and they were still worried about whether she would hurt Molly in the future. She had been soaked all night. Not fished out by the servants until dawn, and thrown back into her room like trash. Rachel curled up on the bed, trembling with pain with every breath. When she had recovered a little, she forced herself to get up and began to pack her belongings. Since she was about to die, she wanted to leave cleanly, without leaving any trace of herself in this house. That way, in her next life, she wouldn't have to meet them again. She pulled out the photos, diaries, and Dylan's gifts she had treasured over the years. One by one, they were tossed into the brazier. The flames devoured memories of the past, along with what little remained of her life. Just then, the door was suddenly pushed open. "What are you burning?" Shirley stood at the doorway, her gaze icy. Rachel didn't even look up, calmly tossing the photo into the brazier. "None of your business." Shirley clicked closer in her high heels, looking down at her with disdain. "What's with that attitude? Do you still think you're the high and mighty young miss of the Everleigh family?" The flames reflected off Shirley's meticulously made-up face, making her expression appear especially vicious. "Rachel, let me tell you, the you of now is just a dog anyone can kick." No sooner had the words left her mouth than Shirley suddenly raised her foot and viciously kicked over the brazier. Crash! Burning papers scattered in all directions, their embers landing on the pile of old curtains nearby. Flames instantly leaped up. Rachel rushed to smother the flames but was shoved aside by Shirley. The fire spread rapidly, thick smoke quickly filling the entire room. "Fire! Put it out, quick!" The panicked shouts of servants came from downstairs. But the fire was already out of control. Waves of heat assaulted her face as Rachel coughed violently from the thick smoke, her vision beginning to blur. She struggled to escape, but Shirley grabbed her wrist, trying to run. "Let go." Rachel struggled weakly. "We'll die." Shirley smiled sweetly. "Then let's die together." Just as the two were locked in stalemate, the door was violently kicked open. Dylan and Elwyn rushed in, their faces filled with panic, but they visibly relaxed the moment they saw Shirley. "What happened?" Elwyn immediately shielded Shirley in his arms and demanded sharply, "How did the fire start so suddenly?" Shirley immediately reddened her eyes, pointing at Rachel and sobbing. "She suddenly went mad, trying to burn all of Molly's belongings. When I tried to stop her, she set the entire room on fire." "I didn't." Rachel weakly shook her head, but the thick smoke choked her before she could finish. Dylan's gaze instantly turned icy. He strode forward and grabbed Rachel's wrist. "Rachel, I thought you had learned your lesson. After 3 years, you still refused to repent." Rachel opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her vision began to blur, and in her final moments of consciousness, all she heard was Elwyn's icy voice. "Someone, throw her into the oven." Let her reflect on her actions. Rachel was dragged into the kitchen by the bodyguards and forcibly shoved into the preheated oven. As the oven door opened, a wave of scorching heat hit her. She was thrust inside, her skin searing against the blistering metal, emitting a sizzling sound. A piercing scream echoed through the kitchen as her skin felt like being simultaneously stabbed by thousands of red-hot steel needles, sweat evaporating the instant it surfaced. She desperately pounded on the oven door, but the person outside turned a deaf ear. Gradually, her consciousness began to blur, visions flooding before her eyes. As a child, Dylan had held her hand, promising to protect her forever. Her older brother carried her on his back and ran several blocks to the hospital when she had a fever. Her parents celebrated her birthday with smiles. None of these were lies. Someone truly loved her once. But later, why did they all come to love someone else? The pain tore through her heart, yet no scream could escape her lips. After what felt like an eternity, the furnace door finally creaked open. Shirley stood outside, her smile saccharine sweet. "Cool her down." A bucket of ice water cascaded over her head. The shock from extreme heat to extreme cold sent Rachel into convulsions. She curled up on the ground like a dying fish, until finally, she completely lost consciousness. The hospital's fluorescent lights stung the eyes with their harsh glare. Rachel lay on the hospital bed, her body wrapped in bandages, her skin still bearing the burn marks from the oven's searing heat. The hospital room door opened as Dylan and Elwyn stepped inside. "Do you admit your mistake?" Dylan stood by the bed, looking down at her with a voice as cold as ice. "This is just a small lesson. If you dare to destroy Molly's things again, the consequences will be far worse." Rachel silently stared at the ceiling without speaking. She no longer had the strength to argue. At that moment, the door opened again, and Shirley suddenly entered carrying soup, her face adorned with a sweet smile. "Miss Rachel, are you in pain? I specially made some soup to help you recover." As she spoke, her fingers secretly dug into Rachel's arm wound. Rachel instinctively pushed her away in pain, but Shirley took the opportunity to fall to the ground, tears instantly welling up. "Miss Rachel, I just pitied you and wanted to show concern. If you won't accept my kindness, fine, but why push me?" "Rachel," Elwyn grabbed her wrist tightly. "How much longer are you going to persist in your delusions?" Dylan's gaze turned completely cold. cut off all her painkillers and 4 nutrients, let her reflect properly. The nurse tremblingly removed the 4 tube. Rachel winced in pain but clenched her teeth without uttering a sound. On the day of her discharge, it happened to be the death anniversary of her parents and Molly. Dylan and Elwyn took her to the cemetery as usual to pay their respects. Every year, they would punish her. This year's punishment was to make her kneel and kowtow step by step up a staircase strewn with nails. In the past, Rachel might have struggled, but this year, she had grown numb. She knelt down expressionlessly, the sharp nails instantly piercing through her knees. Blood snaked down the steps, yet she seemed to feel no pain. Mechanically kowtowing, rising, and kneeling again, Dylan and Elwyn stood by, nodding in satisfaction. Finally learned some manners. By the time she reached the graveyard, Rachel's knees were already mangled flesh, the nails coated with shredded meat and bloody threads. Apologized to Mom, Dad, and Molly, Elwyn commanded coldly. Rachel knelt before the grave, her voice hoarse. I'm sorry. Louder. Dylan frowned. I'm sorry, she repeated mechanically, her eyes as hollow as a walking corpse. After the memorial service, Dylan and Elwyn took Shirley and turned to leave. Go back by yourself. They threw the words over their shoulders without looking back. Rachel struggled to her feet, but didn't go home. Dragging her blooded legs, she limped toward the cemetery trading center. I'd like to purchase a burial plot, she said to the staff member. The staff member paused, taken aback. You mean for myself, she replied calmly. The staff member hesitated, then finally processed the paperwork. This plot now belongs to you. It's ready for use whenever you need it. Rachel was just about to express her thanks when 2 icy voices suddenly came from behind her. What are you buying a cemetery plot for? She slowly turned around and saw Dylan and Elwyn standing at the doorway, having returned with dark expressions fixed on her. Rachel was about to speak when Shirley suddenly stepped forward from behind, feigning innocence as she said, Did you mishear? I clearly heard her say she wasn't buying a plot, she was going to smash the graves of your parents and Miss Molly instead. Her voice was soft, yet it pierced like a knife, striking straight into Rachel's heart. Rachel stood frozen in place, too numb to even bother defending herself. She knew that no matter what she said, they wouldn't believe her. Sure enough, Dylan's face darkened instantly. Rachel, we saw the storm coming and waited so long for you to come down. Only to find you scheming something so audacious. Seems like the past lessons still weren't enough for you. Elwyn flew into a rage, grabbing Rachel by the collar. Wasn't it enough that you killed Mom, Dad, and Molly? Now you won't even let their graves rest in peace. Rachel wanted to laugh. Just who exactly had she killed? Everyone was alive and well, the one who was supposed to die was clearly her. But before she could speak, Elwyn had already yanked her out of the trading center. Since you never learn, I'll make sure you remember the pain of hurting them. With that, he delivered a vicious kick to her back. Rachel tumbled down the steps, the sharp edges of the stone stairs tearing her skin, her bones emitting a sickening crunch upon impact. She rolled to the foot of the hill like a ragged cloth, covered in blood, before finally passing out from the excruciating pain. After what felt like an eternity, Rachel awoke in the icy rain. She lay in a pool of blood. Utterly alone, it was as if the entire cemetery staff had been forbidden to approach her. No one dared come near. Her ribs were likely broken, her right leg completely useless, and the wound on her forehead still bled freely, the rain mixing with blood to form tiny rivulets on the ground. She gritted her teeth and crawled inch by inch toward the nearest railing, her nails dug into the dirt, leaving long trails of blood on the ground. Every movement felt like being stabbed by countless needles. Finally, she grabbed the railing and shakily stood up. 1 step, 2 steps, blood dripped down the trouser leg, blooming into crimson flowers in the rainwater. By the time she struggled to the hospital to treat her wounds and returned to the Everleigh household, it was already late at night. The living room light was still on. Dylan and Elwyn sat on the sofa, watching coldly as she limped inside. Do you admit your mistake? Elwyn asked coldly. Rachel nodded numbly. Yes. Dare you do it again? She shook her head. Only then did the 2 of them rise to leave, thoroughly satisfied. In the days that followed, Rachel secluded herself in her room, refusing to step foot outside. It wasn't until Shirley's birthday banquet that she was forcibly dragged out to attend. The celebration was held on a luxurious cruise ship, where crystal chandeliers refracted dazzling light and a champagne tower glittered brilliantly at the center of the ballroom. Rachel stood in the shadows of the corner, watching the radiant Shirley at the center of the stage. Dylan was kneeling on one knee, slipping those diamond-studded high heels onto her feet. Elwyn stood nearby, personally fastening the priceless ruby necklace around her neck as guests raised their glasses and crowded around her. In a daze, Rachel recalled the past. Her birthday celebrations from childhood onward had always been held aboard this cruise ship. Back then, Dylan would set aside all his work to personally decorate the entire banquet hall for her. Elwyn would drive across half the city overnight just because she mentioned wanting cake from that shop in the West District. Her parents would proudly introduce her to everyone. This is our most beloved daughter. Now, she hides in the corner like an invisible ghost, where even the waiters deliberately bypass her when offering champagne. Next, let's light the birthday fireworks for Miss Shirley. The MC's voice snapped her back to reality. The guests cheered and surged toward the deck. Rachel was jostled by the crowd and had no choice but to follow. The sea breeze brushed against her cheeks, carrying a salty dampness. Bang! The first firework bloomed in the night sky, illuminating the entire expanse of the sea. But just then, the once clear night sky suddenly darkened with ominous clouds. What's going on? The weather alert didn't mention rain tonight. Before anyone could react, a fierce wind suddenly rose, and torrential rain poured down. A massive wave struck, violently rocking the cruise ship. Rachel slipped and tumbled overboard toward the ship's railing. At the same moment, she saw Shirley being flung over the railing too. Plop, plop. Both of them hit the water almost simultaneously. Icy seawater rushed into her nostrils instantly. Rachel struggled desperately to surface. Help! Her cries for help were swallowed by the waves. Through blurred vision, she saw Dylan and Elwyn leap into the water without hesitation. They swam toward Shirley's direction. Yet, not a single person glanced back at her. Rachel woke up again to the pungent smell of disinfectant. Realizing she'd been sent back to the hospital, the ward stood empty, with only a nurse recording the instrument readings. Seeing she was awake, the nurse said matter-of-factly, "Mr. Dylan and Mr. Elwyn asked me to check on you." She nodded numbly, propping herself up as the nurse handed her a test report. The words terminal cancer glared back at her with cruel clarity, dragging her aching body out of the ward. She paused outside Shirley's room upon hearing a familiar voice within. "Don't worry, Mom and Dad, I'm doing well. Dylan and Elwyn have been taking good care of me." Shirley's voice was sickly sweet, then feigned concern. "By the way, I heard Sister also fell into the sea. Aren't you going to ask about her condition?" On the other end of the line, Rachel's parents paused briefly before replying coldly. "She brought this upon herself. We only care about you." Rachel stood outside the door, her heart clenched as if by an invisible fist. The parents who had once doted on her so dearly now couldn't even be bothered with whether she lived or died. She turned to leave, but the hospital room door was suddenly pulled open. Shirley stood at the doorway, wearing a victor's smile. "You heard everything." Rachel looked at her calmly. "Yes, so you knew all along that Mom and Dad and I faked our deaths, didn't you?" Shirley advanced step by step. Rachel looked up with numb indifference. "So what if it is? This was your idea, wasn't it? Why are you targeting me like this?" "Why?" Shirley laughed, her smile twisted with perverse satisfaction. "Because you were born the privileged young lady of the Everleigh family, while I grew up in an orphanage, bullied by everyone, because everyone adores you. While I had nothing." Her voice grew increasingly shrill. "I'm going to take everything from you, your parents, your brother, your fiancé. I'll make you experience what it's like to have nothing." Hearing this, Rachel felt no anger, for she had long learned her lesson. The necklace around her neck was a recording device. At this moment, Shirley's true colors were all being recorded. Shirley was still gloating triumphantly. "Your parents and Elwyn are such fools, they couldn't even see through such a clumsy frame-up," she sneered. "And Dylan, who used to love you so much, now he only loves me. Rachel, you'll never beat me." With that, she suddenly took a step back, a flash of madness flickering in her eyes. "Come to think of it, there's still one plan I haven't carried out yet. Rachel, get ready to taste what hell feels like." Rachel felt her heart tighten. Before she could react, she saw Shirley suddenly turn around and leap out the window without hesitation. Bang! A dull thud of a heavy object hitting the ground echoed from below. Rachel stood frozen in place, her ears ringing. At that very moment, the familiar roar of anger echoed from downstairs in the hospital. Molly, trembling, she rushed to the window and saw Dylan and Elwyn frantically running toward Shirley, who had fallen on the lawn. They were still holding delicate dessert bags. Clearly having just returned from buying Shirley's favorite cake, Dylan scooped up the blood-soaked Shirley, his voice trembling. "Hold on, I'm taking you to emergency care now." Elwyn followed behind with reddened eyes, shouting repeatedly, "Doctor, get a doctor quickly." Medical staff rushed over with an emergency stretcher, and Shirley was swiftly wheeled into the operating room. As they passed by Rachel, Shirley weakly opened her eyes and pointed a trembling finger at her. "It was Miss Rachel who pushed me." These words hit like a bucket of ice water poured over her head, Rachel's blood instantly freezing in her veins. She saw Dylan and Elwyn turn their heads simultaneously, their gazes cold as venom-dipped daggers, piercing straight through her heart. "Someone," Elwyn's voice was terrifyingly calm, "tie her up and take her to the hospital rooftop." He stepped closer slowly, looking down at Rachel with disdain. "Since you dared to push her off, you should experience the same fate." The bodyguard immediately stepped forward, roughly grabbing Rachel's wrist. In the past, she would have hysterically explained, struggled, and begged, but now, she just looked at them numbly. If I say it wasn't me, would you believe me? Dylan sneered. Someone with your record, why should we believe you? Rachel laughed, laughing until silent tears streamed down her face. Yes. She should have known long ago. They never believed her. The bodyguards dragged her onto the rooftop, where the howling night wind made her frail body sway precariously. To make her taste the full flavor of despair before the fall, they didn't even bother to push her directly. Instead, they tied her to the railing with coarse hemp rope, then took out a dull knife and began slowly sawing at the cord, forcing her to endure the torment of blunt steel grinding against her flesh. Scree, scree. Each scrape of the blade felt like flaying her nerves alive, keeping her painfully aware as death crept closer with every passing second. Rachel looked down at the ground below, where traces of blood still remained from Shirley's leap through the window. The rope grew thinner, and her body began to sway slightly. At the moment the last fiber snapped, Rachel fell from the heights like a withered leaf. Bang! She crashed heavily onto the ground, blood spreading beneath her. Shimmering eerily under the moonlight, in her final moments of agony, the last thing in her fading consciousness was the cold, retreating figures of Dylan and Elwyn walking away. Rachel woke again to find glaring sunlight streaming through the gaps in the hospital room curtains. She struggled to open her eyes, every ache in her body a reminder that she was still alive. The hospital door swung open as Shirley entered with an entourage, her face wearing a victor's smile. Awake. She looked down at Rachel, her voice cloyingly sweet. Now you see how much Dylan and Elwyn love me, don't you? She leaned down and whispered in Rachel's ear. But I must tell you, this is only the beginning. As soon as the words fell, Shirley suddenly raised her hand and fiercely slapped herself several times. Slap, slap. The crisp sound of slaps was particularly jarring in the hospital room. Before Rachel could react, Shirley had already torn open her collar and rushed out screaming. Help, help. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway. What's going on? Dylan was the first to burst in, his suited figure carrying a chill. Elwyn followed closely behind, his gaze freezing instantly when it landed on Rachel. Shirley sobbed in Dylan's arms. She hired these people to assault me. Rachel, Dylan grabbed her chin sharply. Can't you go a single day without stirring up trouble? Even injured like this, you still won't calm down. Rachel lay quietly on the hospital bed, her hollow eyes fixed on the ceiling. Her lips were chapped and pale, and 4 needles still inserted in her wrist, her entire body emaciated almost beyond recognition. When she remained silent, Dylan's rage intensified. Speak. Did you hire people to bully Shirley again? The hospital room was terrifyingly quiet, with only the rhythmic beeping of the monitor breaking the silence. Good, very good, Elwyn suddenly sneered. Since you enjoy playing these games so much, you can stay locked up with this group of people. He turned and gave the bodyguard a meaningful glance. Lock the door. As they dragged Shirley away, Shirley pretended to look back fearfully. Brother Dylan, Brother Elwyn, this isn't right. Is it really okay to lock her up with these people? What could possibly go wrong? Dylan said coldly. These are all people she brought upon herself. That being said, in the hallway, Dylan and Elwyn unconsciously stopped in their tracks at the same time. The two held their breath and listened for a few seconds. The ward was completely silent, with no sound at all, before they finally left with full relief. However, what they didn't know was, inside the ward, those men were watching through the peephole to confirm they had gone far enough. Let's go, the leading man grinned, turning to walk toward the hospital bed. Boys, let's give Miss Lou some special attention. A rough hand clamped over her mouth as her hospital gown was torn open with a sharp rip. The moment the cold air touched her skin, Rachel struggled wildly. Let go. Tears blurred her vision as desperate sobs were muffled against her palm. Her nails dug deep bloody grooves into the man's arm, only to be met with even rougher treatment. Phut! Suddenly, a mouthful of blood sprayed from her lips, splattering across the snow-white sheets. The men froze, then came the second mouthful, the third. Blood gushed uncontrollably from the corners of her mouth, quickly staining more than half of the hospital bed crimson. Fuck, she's vomiting blood, call the doctor. The men panicked and backed away. Someone knocked over the floor stand, the sound of shattering glass mingling with screams. Rachel's consciousness began to blur, her ears filled with chaotic footsteps and the alarms of medical equipment, blood pressure dropping rapidly. Prepare for emergency treatment. Where are the family members? Notify them immediately. The doctor's urgent voice faded in and out. Liver failure, coagulation dysfunction. She could stop breathing at any moment. The nurse's voice trembled with tears. I've called dozens of times, but her brother and fiancé refused to believe it, saying she's bribing the doctors to put on a show. Rachel, her dilated pupils reflected the ceiling. Almost there. They'll soon find out whether she's putting on an act or not. Rachel was ultimately resuscitated. When she woke up, the hospital room was empty, with only the monotonous beeping of the monitor. Seeing she was awake, the nurse hurried over to persuade her to rest more, but she directly pulled out the IV from her hand and staggered out of bed. "Miss Rachel, you can't be discharged yet." The nurse frantically blocked her path. "Thank you, but I'm dying. I don't want to die here." Her voice was featherlight, yet carried an unshakable resolve. The nurse recoiled instinctively, frightened by her hollow gaze. Rachel dragged her battered body out of the hospital, step by agonizing step. When she pushed open the door, Dylan and Elwyn were sitting on the living room sofa, not even bothering to look up at the sound. Finally decided to come back, Dylan sneered. "Done playing dead?" Elwyn flipped through the documents in his hand, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You even fabricated a lie about being in emergency care just to make us let you off, even if you really died." Dylan finally looked up at her, his eyes cold as ice. "We wouldn't spare you a single ounce of pity." Rachel stood at the doorway, sunlight streaming in from behind her, casting a slender shadow on the floor. She didn't explain. Nor did she make a scene. She simply glanced at them quietly, then turned and went back to her room. For the next few days, Rachel kept herself locked in her room, quiet as a ghost. Dylan and Elwyn surprisingly didn't give her any trouble, even thinking she had finally come to her senses, until her birthday. Dylan knocked on her door, holding an exquisite gown in his hands. "It's your birthday today, and we've prepared a surprise for you." Elwyn stood behind him, wearing a rare gentle smile. "Change your clothes, we're taking you somewhere." Rachel watched the hypocritical smiles on their faces and suddenly found it laughable. She knew what kind of surprise they had prepared. They planned to tell her today that her parents and Molly never actually died. It was all just an act. They would even magnanimously say that as long as she stopped targeting Molly from now on, everything would go back to how it was. But it couldn't go back. Nothing could ever go back. "I still need to get ready," she said softly. "You go ahead first." Elwyn frowned but eventually nodded. "Hurry up, don't keep us waiting too long." After they left, Rachel changed into that gown, a long white dress, pure as a wedding veil. But she didn't head to the hotel. Instead, she walked alone toward the river crossing bridge. The night wind lifted her skirt as the river surged endlessly beneath her feet. She stood by the bridge, gazing at the distant glittering lights. When suddenly memories from many years ago came flooding back, her father carrying her on his shoulders to watch fireworks, her mother gently combing her hair. Elwyn would run to every sweet shop on the street just because she said, "I want some candy." Dylan once blushed under the same starry sky and said to her, "Rachel, I'll be good to you for the rest of my life." Those beautiful memories now feel like a distant, unreachable dream. The phone suddenly rang. It was Dylan calling. "Rachel, why aren't you here yet? We're still waiting to surprise you." Rachel gazed at the river and whispered, "You prepared a surprise for me, and I've prepared one for you too. You don't need to prepare anything." Elwyn snatched the phone. "Rachel, come quickly. We have something important to tell you." "I can't make it." "What?" She gazed at the dark river waters. "Come to the Cross River Bridge instead. The surprise I have for you is right here." With that, she hung up and placed the cancer diagnosis report along with the necklace that had recorded Molly's true nature on the railing. The night wind tousled her long hair as her heart remained utterly calm. She cast one last glance at the glittering city lights, then without hesitation climbed over the railing, leaving not a single word of farewell. Plop! The icy river swallowed her figure in an instant. The water was bone-chilling, yet she felt only liberation. From this day forward, nothing in this world could ever hurt her again. Rachel didn't struggle in the slightest, letting the river swallow her whole. Countless memories flashed before her eyes. Rachel thought, if she could start over, she would never choose them again. She closed her eyes with a smile and never woke again. Meanwhile, at her birthday party, Dylan and Elwyn stared at the disconnected call, a sense of unease rising in their hearts. The two exchanged glances, and Dylan was the first to speak. Did something happen to Rachel? Elwyn held his phone, unsure whether he was comforting himself or Dylan. What could possibly happen to her? She values us so much, she probably just wants us to go find her. Shirley walked over with an innocent look. Is sister not coming? Does she hate me, Mr. and Mrs.? Everleigh also wore expressions of anger. We've already decided to forgive her, yet she dares to throw a tantrum. After all these years, she still has that same strange temperament, Mrs. Everleigh looked at the aggrieved Shirley and gently pulled her into an embrace. It's all right, Mom and Dad will always stand by your side. If she can't accept you, then she shouldn't expect to receive our love. With this assurance, Shirley smirked triumphantly in a corner where they couldn't see. Rachel, you'll never win against me. Since Rachel is unwilling to come, let's turn this birthday party into Molly's official family recognition banquet. From now on, she won't be Shirley anymore, she'll be Molly, the eldest daughter of our Everleigh family, and the child your mother and I love most. But Dylan wanted to say more, but Molly stopped him. Big sister must just be trying to use this matter to get your and brother's attention. As for what we were going to discuss today, you can tell her tomorrow. She definitely won't blame you or brother. As she spoke, she took Elwin's hand. Come cut the cake with me quickly. Mom specially chose my favorite flavor and design for this cake. Hearing her say this, Dylan and Elwin had no choice but to put their phones aside and accompany Molly in celebrating her birthday all over again. By the time the birthday celebration ended, it was already past midnight. Dylan had drunk some alcohol and was slightly tipsy. Suddenly, a sharp ringing sound pierced through, sobering his alcohol-clouded mind. Hello, are you a relative of Rachel? Upon hearing Rachel's name, Dylan quickly responded, yes, what's the matter? For some reason, before the other end of the phone could reply, Dylan's heart suddenly raced, as if it were about to leap out of his throat. Beside him, Elwin, hearing the call, also held his breath, waiting for the response from the other end. We regret to inform you that Miss Rachel jumped from the Cross River Bridge at 8 p.m. tonight. We did everything we could to save her, but unfortunately, we couldn't bring her back. She left some belongings at the scene. When would you be able to come and collect them? The staff's voice still echoed in his ears, but Elwin could no longer make out the words. His mind buzzed with static, his thoughts grinding to an abrupt halt. Suicide. Rachel would never choose to take her own life. Something must be wrong. She must have just been angry, deliberately conspiring with others to trick him. Dylan thought this way, but his hand holding the phone wouldn't stop trembling. Hello, Mr. Dylan, are you still there? It's fake, isn't it? Did Rachel send you to deceive me? Dylan shouted hoarsely, desperate for an answer that would put his mind at ease. Sorry, Mr. Dylan, we deeply regret the passing of Rachel. But Miss Rachel chose to end her life by jumping into the river. Hearing these words, Dylan felt all the blood in his body freeze. A sharp ringing exploded in his ears, and the sounds of everything around him grew increasingly distant. Elwin also stood frozen in place, utterly unable to believe this news. Did Rachel contact you all to play this cruel joke on me? Facing Elwin's questioning, I'm sorry. I know this might be hard for your family to accept, but I truly apologize. We still hope you can come as soon as possible to claim Miss Rachel's remains. Molly walked over and saw the two standing there in shock. Dylan, brother, what's wrong? Dylan pushed her hand away and strode out without a word. Elwin also had no patience to explain, following Dylan's steps as they left, staring at the red marks left on her hand from being pushed away. Molly felt a surge of displeasure in her heart, mixed with faint traces of unease, but this uneasiness soon dissipated. What could possibly go wrong? Now her greatest obstacle was Rachel. But in the hearts of both the Everleigh family and Dylan, she wasn't even worth a single strand of her hair. He drove the car at breakneck speed the entire way. Every little detail about Rachel from this period came flooding back into her mind. The way she looked at her was no longer filled with love, how she no longer reacted fiercely to the torment from her and Elwin, and how she would cough up blood in the hospital even from the slightest bump. She would vomit blood. There were also the painkillers always kept in the bag at home. In the hospital, the words the doctor had said that they hadn't heard clearly now became crystal clear. As these details replayed one by one in his mind, Dylan realized that all the signs had been there all along. The car came to a stop in front of the police station. Staring at that grand door, Dylan no longer had the courage to open it. He stood at the entrance for a long time, until his limbs grew stiff. Before finally looking up and pushing open that door, the staff came forward and led him to the office. The police handed them a small bag. These are the belongings left behind by Rachel. Inside was a report slip and a USB drive. Dylan opened the report and his gaze fell on the test results at the bottom. Advanced gastric cancer. The 4 bold characters pierced his heart like a sharp sword. As if unable to withstand the shock, his body swayed unsteadily. And the hand holding that thin sheet of paper trembled uncontrollably. As for the USB drive inside, Dylan had no idea what it was, so he simply put it in his pocket. Rachel, where are you? After a long silence, Dylan finally spoke these words in a hoarse voice. The police brought the body to the forensic autopsy room. When we arrived, there were no vital signs. According to surveillance footage, Rachel jumped into the river around 8 p.m. and her body wasn't discovered until 11 p.m. by a nearby fisherman. Looking at Rachel lying on the cold dissection table, covered with a white sheet, Dylan felt as if a nerve in his head was being pulled and cut, causing unbearable pain. He stood before the table, but couldn't muster the courage to lift the sheet for a long time. He desperately prayed in his heart that the person lying there wasn't Rachel, that they had made a mistake. But the dress peeking out from under the white sheet cruelly told them otherwise. This is Rachel, wearing the dress they had prepared together. She jumped into the river without a trace of hesitation. No one knew how much time had passed before Dylan finally lifted the white cloth. Rachel was drenched, her face ashen pale. Dylan, the last glimmer of hope in his heart, was utterly shattered. Rachel was truly gone, not a lie, not a prank anymore. That Rachel, who had grown up with him from toddling steps to graceful youth, whom he had always cherished in the palm of his hand, was truly lost. Dylan could bear it no longer. He collapsed by the bedside, clutching those cold hands as he broke into anguished sobs. "I'm sorry, Rachel, I'm truly sorry. Please wake up, okay? I'll take you for treatment. I'll take you to the best hospitals and find the best doctors for you. When you recover, let's get married." "Alright." Elwyn also knelt down beside them. His eyes filled with disbelief and sorrow. "Rachel, I was wrong." These were the words Rachel had longed to hear for so long, but now she lay there lifeless, unable to give them even the slightest response. The staff had seen such scenes many times before and pushed a tissue toward him as his sobs gradually subsided. "Did she leave any words for me?" "I'm sorry. We didn't find any other personal belongings of Miss Rachel at the scene." As for the police station staff paused before continuing. "Miss Rachel's last phone call before her death was to you. Did she leave you any final words?" "No." Dylan covered his head in agony. "She left him nothing, said nothing to him." Did she hate him this much, hateful enough to refuse him even a single word, leaving behind only a cold corpse, and treating it as some kind of surprise? Hate him enough to discard all these years of shared affection? Hated him so much that she never wanted to have anything to do with him again? Dylan didn't know how he managed to complete the procedures at the police station, nor how he brought her ashes home. He slumped on the sofa, staring at the urn of ashes. It wasn't until his phone rang that Dylan snapped back to reality. "Hello, is this Mr. Dylan? I'm the cemetery administrator. Miss Rachel reserved a burial plot with us and listed you as the contact. She asked me to call you today so you could place her ashes in the grave she chose." Dylan hung up the phone but remained motionless. He looked around the room filled with their shared memories, only to find it terrifyingly empty now. The framed photo of the two on the table had long disappeared. The throw pillows they picked out together were discarded on the sofa. Every trace of Rachel had vanished without a remnant in this house. Dylan opened his phone, wanting to catch one last glimpse of Rachel, but after scouring the entire album, he found no photos of them together. His album used to be filled almost entirely with pictures of Rachel, countless versions of Rachel. Yet at some unknown point, the person captured in his phone had become Molly. The only photo was taken 5 years ago, when she was in a coma. During his hospital visit to see her, Dylan was plunged into immense agony. Every time he closed his eyes, the last words Rachel spoke to him echoed endlessly in his mind. "The surprise I prepared for you is right here," clutching Rachel's ashes in his arms. He repeated countless apologies, but no matter how many "I'm sorry" are said, none can bring Rachel back. Dylan could only fall briefly asleep under the numbing influence of alcohol, only to be jolted awake by nightmares soon after. When the doorbell rang, Dylan didn't move. A long time passed before the front door opened. Against the light, Dylan could barely make out the figure of the visitor, but that figure looked somewhat familiar, resembling Rachel. "Dylan," Molly's voice rang out. And Dylan lowered his head in disappointment, hurling the wine glass on the coffee table toward her. Bang! Molly had just stepped through the door when a wine glass flew across the living room, shattering into pieces at her feet, followed by a voice seething with anger. "Get out, all of you, get out." Molly paused mid-step but carefully stepped around the glass shards to enter, though only a few short days had passed. Molly found she could barely recognize the Dylan before her. His face was haggard, and upon closer inspection, several white hairs had sprouted among his locks, making him appear much older. Dylan's gaze finally shifted from Rachel's urn to focus on Molly's face. "Dylan, what's wrong with you? Did something happen?" Elwyn's attitude toward her changed drastically after returning home, even refusing to answer their parents' words, and moved out on his own. "Molly has been thinking about what exactly happened these past 2 days. Get out, I don't want to see you again." Dylan couldn't help but think whenever seeing Molly, if only he had been more resolute back then and directly told Rachel the truth, perhaps the outcome would have been different. It's all because of Molly. It's all because of the Everleigh family. They killed Rachel. "Dylan, I've missed you so much all this time." She slowly approached Dylan, pouring out her longing during this separation, completely unaware of the increasingly dark expression on the face of the person before her. Suddenly, she noticed the death certificate on the table. The name Rachel above caught her eye. In an instant, Rachel's face lit up with barely contained joy, only to quickly morph into sorrow. "Dylan, I know you're heartbroken over your sister's passing, but the departed are gone. If you keep destroying yourself like this, it would break your sister's heart to see it." Her hand gently rested on Dylan's arm as she spoke softly. "It's okay, Dylan, you still have me. I'll always be here for you." Slap! The very next moment, Dylan's palm came crashing down hard across Molly's face. Molly covered her face, looking at him in disbelief. Dylan had always been a gentle gentleman in her memory. Over these years, she had basked in his meticulous care. She had almost come to regard him as her fiancé. Just as she was about to say something more, Dylan's hand came to rest on the nape of her neck. The fear of suffocation made her struggle desperately for mercy. Just when she thought she was about to be strangled, Dylan finally released his grip, his voice icy and devoid of any warmth. "Get out." Molly didn't dare say another word and could only leave quickly. With her departure, the villa plunged back into darkness. The phone rang again. "Hello, Mr. Dylan." According to Miss Rachel's own last wishes, she wanted to be laid to rest. "May I ask when you plan to hold the funeral for Rachel?" Dylan had received numerous calls from the cemetery management staff during this period, but each time he simply hung up. But recalling Molly's expression just now, Dylan asked, "When did Rachel reserve the burial plot?" Upon hearing the date mentioned by the administrator, Dylan quickly realized it was the anniversary of their parents' and Molly's deaths. The day they had always tormented her. But didn't Molly say that day that Rachel wanted to desecrate their graves? As these thoughts arose, an idea gradually took shape in his mind. Dylan asked hoarsely, "That day, she said she wanted to purchase a burial plot, not to destroy one, didn't she?" After receiving confirmation from the staff, Dylan's breath caught in his throat. All the memories from these past days suddenly turned upside down in his mind, completely transformed. If this matter is false, then, what about the others? What, then, is the truth behind the house fire and the fall from the cruise ship? That day in the hospital, was it really Rachel who pushed Molly out the window? No, none of this makes sense. If Rachel had known she was terminally ill with cancer, why would she still have it out for Molly? Dylan suddenly remembered the USB drive that had been placed with the medical report that day. He had never opened that USB drive, but now. Dylan held it in his hand and suddenly felt that all these questions would find their answers within this USB drive. Dylan inserted the USB drive into his computer. As he looked through all the organized files, his eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Unable to contain his emotions any longer, he immediately took the USB drive and went to Everleigh's house. "What's the matter with that rebellious daughter Rachel? I'm messaging her now. And she won't even reply with a single word. Does she still see me as her father?" Molly timely handed a glass of water to comfort Mr. Everleigh. "Dad, calm down, maybe sister just doesn't want to see me." She put on a hurt expression. "I don't know what she said to my brother. And Dylan too, suddenly treating me so coldly." Molly pointed to the reddened slap mark on her face for Mr. Everleigh and Mrs. Everleigh to see. Seeing Molly wronged, Mrs. Everleigh pulled her into a heartbroken embrace. "Mom will call your brother back right away, and Dylan too. I'll make them bring Rachel along to apologize to you." Elwyn had also been drowning in remorse during this time. More than once, he asked himself whether everything he'd done over these 3 years had been wrong. "Every time I close my eyes, the surveillance footage I saw at the police station that day keeps replaying in my mind." Rachel didn't hesitate for a second before resolutely leaping into the river. When Mrs. Everleigh called, Elwyn reluctantly returned home. Before even stepping inside, the sound of laughter from the living room already reached his ears. "Molly is still the thoughtful one. Mommy loves Molly most." Elwyn's footsteps halted. He'd heard this phrase countless times before, and it had never struck him as odd until now, when it sounded unbearably grating, like a voice endlessly repeating in his ear, "Not her, it shouldn't be like this." The moment Elwyn walked in looking utterly dejected, Mr. Everleigh immediately fired off his accusatory question. "Where's that rebellious daughter of mine? Rachel, why didn't she come back with you? What's gotten into you lately, daring to treat Molly with such attitude?" Elwyn glanced at the three sitting intimately together on the sofa, as if they were the real family unit. His throat tightened. "Rachel is dead." The entire living room suddenly fell into silence, so quiet that the ticking of the wall clock beside them was clearly audible. "You. What did you say?" After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Everleigh finally spoke. Elwyn repeated it again, his voice so low it was almost inaudible. Yet in the silent living room of the Everleigh household, it landed like a violent bomb. "Rachel is dead, on the night of the banquet. She jumped into the river and killed herself." Mrs. Everleigh immediately rushed to Elwyn's side, her eyes hollow, her face filled with disbelief. "You're lying to Mom, aren't you? How could you and your sister come up with such a lie to deceive Mom?" Mrs. Everleigh sobbed uncontrollably while desperately seeking a denial from Elwyn. Elwyn watched the scene before him, suddenly overwhelmed with disgust from the depths of his heart. He placed the death certificate and the cancer diagnosis report together on the table. "This is the certificate Dylan and I obtained from the police station. And the belongings Rachel left behind before jumping into the river." Mrs. Everleigh trembled as she picked up those 2 thin sheets of paper, clutching them to her chest while weeping bitterly. "Mom's Rachel." Molly sat on the sofa, watching the grief-stricken Mr. Everleigh and Mrs. Eva lay sobbed uncontrollably, yet her eyes showed not a trace of sorrow. Instead, she even slightly furrowed her brows. This scene fell into Elwyn's eyes, the moment their eyes met. Molly's eyes immediately welled up with tears, displaying a look of profound sorrow. She walked over to Mrs. Everleigh's side and gently wiped away her tears. "Mom, I'm so sad about what happened to sister. I know you're even more heartbroken, but if you cry yourself sick, I'm sure sister would be sad watching from heaven too." Hearing her words, Mrs. Everleigh forced herself to pull away from her grief. Thank goodness for Molly, otherwise Mom really wouldn't know what to do. Mrs. Everleigh felt unwell with heart palpitations from overwhelming sorrow. Mr. Everleigh took her back to their room to rest. Only Molly and Elwyn remained in the living room. Elwyn's gaze was fixed intently on Molly, who squirmed uneasily but still forced herself to appear composed. "Brother, why are you looking at me like that? Why aren't you grieving for Rachel's death?" Molly's tears immediately streamed down her cheeks. "How could you think that of me, brother? I just needed a moment to process it. Even though sister never liked me, I always hoped we could become a real family." Her tear-streaked face didn't seem fake. Elwyn rubbed his temples in irritation. "Sorry, I'm a bit tired. Go back to your room for now," where he couldn't see. Molly's eyes brimmed with malice. "Why? Can't even rest peacefully after death?" Elwyn recalled how he had just misunderstood Molly. After calming down, he wanted to go apologize to her, but before he could reach the door, the sound of something shattering came from inside the room, followed by Molly's voice filled with resentment. "That damned Rachel. I thought everything would be settled once she died, but it seems I underestimated her. Who knows what trick she used to make everyone mourn for her. Can't even rest in peace." Hearing Molly's words from outside, Elwyn immediately frowned. He had initially thought she had accidentally broken something and was even a little concerned. But now he withdrew the foot that was about to step inside, standing quietly outside the door, even suppressing his own breathing. He wondered what else Molly could say in places he couldn't see, and she truly didn't disappoint her. That bitch Rachel has a surprisingly tough life. The car accident before, falling from the rooftop, none of it could take her life. But no matter how tough her life was, she's still dead now. Hearing this, Elwyn's breath hitched. So all those incidents were orchestrated by Molly, meaning the truth was she actually wanted Rachel's life. All the strange occurrences during this period suddenly connected like pieces of a puzzle. Molly was neither surprised nor saddened by Rachel's death precisely because she had planned it all, from beginning to end. All she wanted was Rachel dead, to completely replace Rachel's position in the Everleigh family. Elwyn swung the door open violently, his eyes bloodshot. Glaring fixedly in Molly's direction, the shattered fragments of the glass spread across the floor, making it immediately clear what had happened. And that woman, whose ferocious expression hadn't yet been concealed, who else could it be but Molly? When she heard the sound and looked up, her gaze collided directly with his. Stripped of his usual gentle facade, he could hardly believe this was the same Molly who had merely acted somewhat spoiled before him, indulged by the Everleigh family's favor. But thinking back to her words just now, all of this suddenly seemed so natural. Elwyn stepped before her, lowering his gaze to take in her flustered expression from above. When he spoke again, his voice was laced with barely contained fury. "Molly, what really happened with your fall from the window? Was Rachel truly trying to frame you?" Hearing his words, she knew he had overheard her earlier remarks. To say she wasn't flustered would be a lie, but she eventually calmed herself. She tentatively reached for Elwyn's hand. Seeing he didn't pull away, she grew more confident and resumed her usual demeanor. "Brother, let me explain." Before she could finish speaking, voices of Dylan and the servants rose from below. "Where is Molly? The young lady has gone to bed. Please come back tomorrow." Then came the sound of footsteps ascending the stairs. The next moment, Dylan stood before Molly, eyes red with anger. Seeing him like this, Molly was suddenly overwhelmed with immense panic, but she quickly regained her composure. "Dylan, why are you coming to see me so late? I'm not angry about what happened today anymore. I know it was because of your sisters." Before she could finish her sentence, Dylan slapped her to the ground. Molly touched her swollen, burning cheek and looked at Dylan in disbelief. Soon, her eyes welled up with tears, blurring her vision and making it hard to see his expression clearly. "Dylan, how could you hit me?" Her trembling voice seemed to convey her grievances, but the tried-and-true method that had always worked before failed this time, only fueling his anger further. Dylan grabbed her by the throat, his eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you still try to lie at this point?" Molly, the grip around her neck tightened relentlessly. Stars began to dance before her eyes as the overwhelming suffocation drove her to claw desperately at his hand. She gasped desperately for air. Yet it was futile, only leaving her throat drier and more parched than before. Fortunately, perhaps sensing her distress, he finally relented and loosened his grip. Molly, a terrifying red mark now marred her fair neck, but she had no time to care. gasping greedily for air only for her hair to be yanked violently, forcing her head up to meet his gaze. "What the hell did you do to Rachel? Why would you deceive us like this?" Molly was thrown to the ground by Dylan, her head hitting the table as blood seeped from her forehead, yet neither of the two present stepped forward to show concern. Dylan hurled the documents containing all the truth at Molly, the sharp edges of the papers cutting her skin, drawing tiny beads of blood. "All the evidence is laid out before you. What more can you possibly say in your defense?" Elwyn crouched down and picked up the scattered reports from the ground, with all those past truths laid bare before him. His eyes filled with disgust as he looked at Molly. Hearing the commotion, Mr. Everleigh and Mrs. Everleigh in the room rushed over and saw Molly kneeling on the ground with blood covering her forehead. They hurried inside. "How could you two treat Molly like this?" Mrs. Everleigh tried to help Molly up from the ground, but was stopped by Elwyn. "Look what your precious Molly has done." Molly clutched at Mrs. Everleigh's sleeve like a drowning person grasping at straws. "Mom, I didn't do it. Please believe me." Mrs. Everleigh stared at the object Elwyn had handed her, its shocking truth glaring back at her. "Molly, did you really do all this?" Molly's only refuge in this household was their affection. She just wanted to bury these matters. "No, Mom, really, it wasn't me. These are all Rachel's false accusations against me. I really didn't do it." Mrs. Everleigh's eyes flashed with hesitation, but Dylan gave her no chance to explain further, directly kicking her violently in the chest. Molly was slammed against the wall, feeling as if her chest had been shattered. "Even now, you still dare to think about making excuses? I've already verified whether these things are true or false." Mrs. Everleigh withdrew her hesitant hand once more, and the look she gave Molly was no longer filled with the same overflowing tenderness as before. Now it held dissatisfaction and even disappointment. Molly looked at them and knew it was all over. "What exactly is the truth behind all this?" A chilling voice reached Molly's ears, making her shiver uncontrollably. No longer daring to hide the truth, her face was streaked with tears as she sobbed. "It was me who wanted to drive Rachel to her death, to take her place in the Everleigh family." Though the weight in his heart had finally lifted, Dylan's eyes grew even redder. Gritting his teeth, he pressed on. "What about the other things?" She wept as she laid everything bare. With each word she spoke, his heart sank deeper. "It was all me. I did everything. Rachel never bullied me. Whether it was falling out the window or hiring someone to assault me, it was all fake. I orchestrated everything. I framed her." Molly dared not hide anything anymore. Terrified that any delay might bring back the fear of death, she completely forgot to maintain her image. As she confessed each detail, watching their expressions darken, the panic in her heart grew more intense. "But you have to understand, I did all of this because of you." Mrs. Everleigh trembled with rage after hearing this. "You did all this for us. For us. You killed my own daughter." Molly crawled on her knees to Mrs. Everleigh, raising her tear-streaked face. "I grew up in an orphanage. And I was so happy to live with you all. I wanted all your attention. That's why I did these things. Besides, didn't you all dislike Rachel too? Even without my framing, Rachel would have died from cancer. Can't we just pretend this never happened? Let's go back to how things were before. Aren't we supposed to be family?" Molly's words left everyone present frozen in place. Mrs. Everleigh completely lost control of her emotions and broke down sobbing. For the first time, she abandoned all decorum, pointing a trembling finger at Molly through her tears. "I never thought you'd feel this way. Even now, you show not a shred of remorse. I truly regret it, regret ever adopting you, raising you to become this heartless wretch who killed my own daughter." Elwyn snapped. "The Everleigh family has given you so much, yet you still dare to harbor such delusions." Molly turned her gaze to Dylan. "Dylan, you like me, don't you? I know I was wrong. I can apologize to them. Even to Rachel. But I genuinely love you. You like me too, don't you?" She had thought this heartfelt confession would move Dylan somewhat, but his expression showed no sign of softening. Instead, it twisted with disgust. "Didn't I fall for you precisely because of your lies and deliberate schemes?" Dylan rebuked her sharply. "It's your endless lies that drove me to make those mistakes. A woman as malicious as you is truly repulsive." Dylan's undisguised disgust pierced Molly's heart. At this moment, her tears flowed with genuine sorrow. "No, Dylan, I truly love you, and don't you love me too?" The love he had once professed to her became her only lifeline in this moment, but Dylan no longer believed her words, refusing to even glance at her again as he utterly rejected her plea. "How could I have ever trusted someone like you? If not for your repeated schemes against Rachel, how could things between us have come to this? Molly, people like you make me sick." The blunt words of loathing left Molly sitting frozen on the ground, motionless for a long while. The meaning behind his words made her pause, or perhaps it was because all pretenses had been torn away. She stared fixedly at Dylan, making him visibly uncomfortable. Just as he turned to leave, Molly forced herself to stand despite the pain, wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes, her gaze, now filled only with resentment and scorn, locked onto them. "Dylan, you call me malicious, but do you really think you're any better?" Then she turned her eyes to Mr. Everleigh and Mrs. Everleigh, and to Elwyn, taking in the disgust and disappointment in their expressions. "You're selfish, foolish, pitiable, and laughable." Looking back now, Rachel was truly pitiful. She had the accident trying to save you all, even became a vegetable for 5 years, yet you felt no guilt or gratitude during those years. Instead, you adopted me, who bears some resemblance to her. "Isn't your behavior utterly ridiculous?" she sneered at Dylan. "What you're saying now sounds devoted, but really, search your conscience, were you ever truly devoted to Rachel? Childhood sweethearts who grew up together, yet after my appearance in just 2 short years, you fell for me, obeyed my every whim, and humiliated Rachel at every turn. Is this what you call devotion? The reason you're furious now, why you hate me to the bone, isn't because of your deep affection for Rachel, but simply because you can't accept the reality that you caused Rachel's death. You want to shift all the blame onto me to ease your own guilt. What you're doing isn't for Rachel at all, you're just seeking peace of mind." Molly turned her gaze to Elwyn, who stood nearby. "You're equally selfish and hypocritical, utterly foolish. Rachel was your own sister who lived with you for over 20 years. Could you really not understand her personality? Yet you cast aside 2 decades of sibling affection and instead came to fuss over me. I should thank you for your brilliant scheme. If not for your idea of faking death to torment Rachel, she wouldn't have died so quickly, so completely. Besides, we've lived together for 5 years. Did you truly not know anything about what I did to Rachel, or was it that you didn't want to know? You understand this better than anyone. My methods weren't even clever, they were clumsy, and yet, you still fell for them completely. If you had truly treated Rachel as your sister and cared for her even a little, I could never have done all this right under everyone's noses." She laughed maniacally, the sound of her laughter even somewhat chilling. "My dear brother, you hold the reins of the Everleigh family. What truth can't you uncover? And you say I hurt her? That's even more laughable. I never laid a hand on her, let alone harmed her. It was you who ran her over with a car because of my 2 words, you who put her in the oven, you who pushed her off the rooftop, and you who had people nearly gang rape her in the hospital. All the suffering she endured was never inflicted by me. It was you who tortured her to the point where she'd rather die. So desperate to escape your clutches that she chose suicide even as cancer was killing her. I am wicked in thought, I killed with malice aforethought, but none of you are innocent either. Rachel wasn't killed by me alone, you're all murderers." Each word struck like a sharp blade, piercing straight through their hearts and stealing their breath away. Molly wasn't done with them yet, her gaze locked onto each person in turn, sweeping across their faces. "We killed Rachel together, we're all murderers here, and none of you are blameless." Molly was still crying and cursing at them as she was dragged into the basement, but she was quickly silenced when the bodyguard covered her mouth. The room fell into complete silence, devoid of any sound. The 4 of them remained quiet, lost in their own thoughts. Molly's words echoed in everyone's mind. Mrs. Everleigh fainted directly from the shock, throwing the entire Everleigh household into chaos. Dylan couldn't remember how he got home. In a daze, he walked into the courtyard and dismissed the servants working in the garden. As he gazed at the jasmine flowers in the garden, an image of Rachel suddenly appeared before his eyes. Just as she had looked back then, the 2 had grown up together, and Rachel had loved visiting his home since childhood. Back then, the yard was bare with no flowers planted. This jasmine plant was brought by Rachel, and they planted it together with their own hands. "I give you jasmine, never to be apart." Every year, he would give Rachel a bouquet of jasmine on her birthday. The jasmine still blooms on time this year, yet everything has changed except the scenery, just like Rachel back then, whose eyes always sparkled when looking at him, like summer nights brimming with starlight. But now she's completely gone from this place. Dylan's gaze swept over every plant in the courtyard. And only at this moment did he suddenly realize how many memories with Rachel he had buried deep within his heart. Her every smile and frown was deeply etched in his mind. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, his throat unbearably dry. The Ford family's basement was pitch black, with only brief glimpses of light when the guards went in to check. In such conditions, Molly had only stayed for 2 days before her spirit was nearly broken. Dylan's footsteps echoed through the stairwell. Molly huddled in the corner, trembling all over. Click-clack, the door swung open. Molly locked eyes with Dylan's crimson gaze and trembled even more violently. "What are you going to do?" she screamed in despair. Dylan didn't answer her, simply stepping back to let the bodyguards enter behind him. The bodyguards carried in a human-sized roasting oven, and the moment Molly saw it, she knew exactly what he intended. As the bodyguards opened the oven door, Molly's hands and feet were brutally bound with ropes. The moment the door closed, a wave of scorching heat rushed at her face. Ah! Molly screamed in pain as if thousands of needles were piercing her skin simultaneously, her sweat evaporating the instant it emerged. The searing temperature made Molly feel as if every inch of her skin was about to melt away. She pounded on the furnace door, hoping for even the slightest mercy from those outside, but Dylan just stood by, listening to her screams without even a flicker of emotion on his face. When the time came, the bodyguard pulled Molly out of the oven. Her entire body was red and blistered, and the bodyguard's rough handling caused chunks of her already fragile skin to peel off. Molly hadn't even recovered from the pain when a bucket of ice water was dumped over her head. The burning pain on her skin cooled instantly, only to be followed by an even greater wave of agony. After enduring this cycle of alternating scorching and freezing torment 2 or 3 times, Molly collapsed on the ground like a puddle of mud. "Don't let her die." Seeing Molly in this state, Dylan merely uttered these 5 indifferent words. In the following days, Dylan continuously tormented Molly with various methods. She was tied to a pillar by bodyguards, and vehicles were driven straight into her, or forced to kowtow step by step on stairs covered with nails to atone before Rachel. Each and every act was a torment Rachel had once endured. After rounds of torment, the basement door was finally opened. Molly was taken to the hospital by the bodyguards. Just when she thought they would finally let her go, a group of men were brought in by Dylan. Seeing this, Molly understood everything. No matter how desperately she struggled and begged, she couldn't soften Dylan's heart. "Dylan, please, I beg you, you can't do this to me, please." Dylan showed no hint of softening in his expression at her pleas. "Isn't this exactly how you treated Rachel back then? What are you afraid of now? These people were all specially selected by me, identical to those you prepared for Rachel. Don't worry, it's just to teach you a lesson." His tone was ordinary, even carrying traces of gentleness, but to Molly, it sent chills down her spine. This was the Ford family's private hospital, with the area outside the ward tightly guarded by Dylan's men. Molly's struggles, screams, and cries for help would receive no response. They covered Molly's mouth, slapped her several times, and violently tore her clothes off with rough and brutal movements. By the time the bodyguards led them away, Molly was left behind like a broken doll. Dylan, clad in tattered clothes. Molly suddenly called out to him, "Dylan, even if you torture me to death, Rachel won't come back. She's dead, gone forever, never to return." Rachel's funeral was held in the old family residence by the Everleys, where a mourning hall was set up. Molly was also brought there, forced to her knees by bodyguards. Mrs. Everley, supported by Mr. Everley, wept bitterly while clutching Rachel's photograph. Elwyn stood nearby, his eyes bloodshot and swollen, looking at their expressions. Molly suddenly burst into laughter. "You Everleys are truly born actors. When the person was alive, you didn't know how to cherish them at all. And now that they're dead, you're here crying pitifully. Those who don't know would think you treated Rachel so well, but in reality, you're the ones who killed Rachel." Elwyn grabbed Molly by the throat and asked through gritted teeth, "Molly, haven't you felt even a shred of remorse all this time?" Molly laughed, her hoarse laughter echoing through the funeral hall, paired with her venomous words like the whisper of a malevolent spirit. She turned her gaze to Rachel's portrait at the center of the funeral hall, her face contorted like a vengeful ghost. "Regret, you're the ones who should be drowning in it. I refuse to feel remorse when midnight dreams come. She's never once visited me. I never shared a childhood bond with her, nor was I the family she protected with her life for over 20 years. Surely her hatred for me isn't as deep as what she feels for you." Molly summoned strength from somewhere, broke free from the ropes, grabbed a nearby candlestick, and hurled it at Mr. Everley and Mrs. Everley. The wooden structure of the old house caught fire easily, and the mourning hall was filled with flammable hemp cloth. Almost the instant it was thrown, the entire hall became engulfed in flames. Molly held the candlestick, watching the figures surrounded by flames, her laughter growing louder and more manic. "If we're going to confess, then let's die together. No one gets away with it." Scorching heat seared their skin as a sudden gust of wind from nowhere made the funeral hall's flames blaze even fiercer. Dylan stood at the center, looking at the panicked others before turning his gaze to Rachel's memorial portrait at the heart of the funeral hall. He didn't struggle. Instead, he leaned against the table and sat down. Perhaps this was divine will, punishment from heaven for all the wicked deeds he had done, or perhaps Rachel wanted him to join her. Dylan blinked his eyes open, struggling to process what was happening. Hadn't he been burned in the funeral hall? Why wasn't he waking up in a hospital? The Ford residence. "Young master, today is the day Miss Rachel is discharged from the hospital. Didn't you plan to pick her up long ago? Why haven't you gotten up at this hour? Are you feeling unwell, or do you have other arrangements?" Hearing the butler's voice, Dylan looked around in disbelief. The room was filled with balloons and flowers, and on the table lay a proposal ring. Had he returned to the eve of his proposal? It was also the day he planned to propose to Rachel when she was discharged from the hospital. Staring at the time on his phone, 5:00 p.m., June 3, 2015, Dylan was stunned. As if suddenly realizing something, he grabbed his phone, dashed to the door, and called Rachel while instructing the driver to start the car. There's still time at this moment. Rachel, wait for me. To the downtown hospital. Quickly, I'm in a hurry. Only after Dylan got into the taxi did he begin to recall everything that had happened since waking up. Today was supposed to be the day he proposed to Rachel. According to his plan from his previous life, he would first pick her up from the hospital, bring her home, tell her how much he missed her during her coma, and then they would naturally be together. The reason things went wrong in his previous life was because he went to pick Rachel up from the hospital with Molly. Rachel couldn't bear the sight of Molly acting intimately with him and laughing cheerfully with his parents. Overwhelmed, she had a huge argument with them before storming off alone in anger. As for the so-called marriage proposal, it was left unresolved. In her previous life, Molly had constantly provoked Rachel, sowing discord between them and Rachel. Watching the scenery flash by outside the window, she knew that if she could just get there first and shield Rachel in front of everyone, none of the tragedies from her past life would happen again. Rachel wouldn't die either. They would live happily together. There was still time for everything. Dylan rushed to the hospital room door and, seeing no one else inside, let out a deep sigh of relief. The moment he saw Rachel, all his longing and regret surged in his heart. He quickly walked over and pulled her into his arms. Rachel, his voice was hoarse, choked with tears. Rachel was puzzled but still reached out to embrace him. What's wrong? Didn't we just see each other yesterday? Why are you crying when you came to pick me up from the hospital today? I just missed you so much, and I was so afraid of losing you. Dylan held Rachel tightly in his arms, unwilling to let go even a little. He feared this was all just a dream, that if he loosened his grip, the dream would end, Rachel would vanish, and he'd never find her again. Rachel thought his worry stemmed from her previous coma. I won't leave you. Didn't the doctor say I've fully recovered now? I'll stay by your side from now on, and never make you worry for so long again. Rachel could feel Dylan's tears dampening her clothes. Hurry and help me pack. Mom, Dad, and my brother will be here soon. They said they have a surprise for me, so mysterious. I wonder what they're planning. Hearing Rachel's words, Dylan's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness, but it was quickly replaced by a gentle facade. I'll always love you, Rachel. Rachel looked up and shared a lingering kiss with him. You're acting a bit strange today. Did something happen? Faced with Rachel's question, Dylan didn't answer but instead said, Rachel, trust me, no matter how others may change, I'll always stay by your side. Though unsure what was going on, Dylan's words filled Rachel's heart with warmth. I know, and I'll always love you too. At that moment, the hospital room door opened. The first to enter wasn't Mr. Everleigh or Mrs. Everleigh nor Elwyn, but rather a girl who bore some resemblance to her. Rachel asked in confusion, who are you looking for? Molly didn't pay attention to Rachel, instead speaking to Dylan behind her. Dylan, didn't you say you'd come with me to pick up my sister? Why weren't you home when I went to find you? As she spoke, she tried to loop her arm through Dylan's, but he pushed her away abruptly. I'm Rachel's fiancé, your future brother-in-law. You need to mind your words and actions. Molly stood frozen in place, her eyes instantly reddening. Rachel, unaware of what had happened, instinctively leaned against Dylan. Following behind, Mrs. Everleigh stepped in and immediately pulled Molly into a comforting embrace upon seeing her distressed expression. What's wrong, Molly? Did someone upset you? Mr. Everleigh and Elwyn quickly gathered around Molly, fussing over her with concern. Rachel watched the three people who had supposedly come to pick her up from the hospital but were now completely ignoring her, feeling a pang of bitterness in her heart, perhaps finally sensing something amiss. Mrs. Everleigh hurriedly introduced Molly to Rachel. This is Molly, the child we adopted a few years ago. She's like a younger sister to you, Rachel. You're the older sister now, so you need to take good care of your little sister. Mrs. Everleigh held Molly's hand with one hand and grasped Rachel's with the other, trying to introduce the two girls to each other. Looking at Molly, who bore some resemblance to herself, Rachel instantly understood what was going on. So this is the surprise you were talking about. Rachel shook off Molly's hand and couldn't help but confront them. Does sister not like me? Hearing Molly's aggrieved words, Elwyn immediately frowned and scolded Rachel. Rachel, where are your manners? Molly is going to be part of our family now. How could you treat her like this? Rachel never expected that her brother, who had always doted on her, would actually scold her like this for Molly's sake. I don't want her as my family. I became a vegetable lying in bed for 5 whole years to save you all. And you found a replacement to project your longing onto. Now you expect me to accept her. Do you think that's realistic? The accusation instantly made the atmosphere in the hospital room awkward, and for a moment, no one spoke. If my sister doesn't like me, Mom, you should just send me back. I've been really happy just being able to stay by your side for this long." The words of retreating to advance instantly erased Mrs. Everleigh's lingering guilt toward Rachel. "Rachel, from now on, she is your sister, whether you accept it or not. The decisions made by your parents are not for you to question." Rachel watched them, overwhelmed with grief, feeling waves of coldness throughout her body. Dylan held her in his arms. "It's okay, Rachel. I'll always be by your side." He was the only person Rachel could rely on now. "Dylan, take me away, please." Rachel truly didn't want to stay in this hospital room any longer, nor did she want to see any of them again. Dylan glared disapprovingly at the Everleigh family, his tone brimming with hostility. "Rachel is your biological daughter, your family for over 20 years, and the one who risked her life to save you all. How could you treat her like this?" The Everleigh family treated her poorly, so from now on I'll be the one to treat her well. Dylan directly took Rachel away with him. Back in the car, Rachel's tears could no longer be held back. She couldn't understand why her parents and brother, who had always doted on her, had become like this. Just because of Molly's 2 sentences, she had to endure their accusations. "Dylan, you're all I have now." Seeing this, Dylan finally realized how terribly wrong he had been. In his previous life, he and the Everleigh family were all deceived by Molly, hurting Rachel because of her few words. At the thought of this, Dylan felt as if his heart were being torn apart. Thankfully, he still had a chance in this lifetime. And everything was still within reach. "Rachel, don't be sad, I will always love you and stay by your side." Dylan brought Rachel back to their cozy little home. As soon as the door opened, Rachel saw the living room bathed in soft lighting, with colorful balloons casting a kaleidoscope of shadows on the walls, filling the entire space with a dreamy and sweet atmosphere. Her favorite music was playing in the room, as if the melody of love was flowing through the air, starting from the entrance. A trail of colorful balloons extended inward, as if guiding Rachel toward this feast of love. In the center of the room, a large heart had been meticulously arranged with carefully placed candles. The warm candlelight flickered gently, like a series of beating hearts, whispering Dylan's burning love. In the middle of the heart lay a bouquet of vibrant red roses, their petals adorned with glistening dewdrops, radiating extraordinary charm. Around the candle, scattered rose petals glow fiery red, their brilliance complementing the candlelight to create an atmosphere of ultimate romance. Around every corner of the room, photos of them together were displayed. Their radiant smiles in the pictures captured every blissful moment. Some photos were encased in exquisite frames and hung on the walls. Others lay scattered across the table, as if narrating the fragments of their journey together. Additionally, some plush toys that Rachel loved were neatly arranged in the room, as if guarding this romantic proposal. When Rachel stepped into this little world filled with love, she was deeply moved by Dylan's thoughtfulness and felt this happiness. "Rachel, will you marry me?" Dylan knelt on one knee, almost reverently asking Rachel this question. "I do." This once unfulfilled proposal from the past life has now found its perfect completion in this lifetime. Dylan gazed at Rachel with deep affection, pulling out the engagement ring he hadn't had time to give her in their previous life from his pocket. Only when Rachel slipped it onto her ring finger did he truly confirm everything was different now. Whatever the reason, he thanked heaven for giving him this second chance to make things right. Since Rachel had just recovered from serious illness, Dylan didn't want her working outside, and she herself wasn't keen on interacting with crowds. So she began writing little stories at home with her pen. Unexpectedly, her illustrated stories went viral on the Big Eyes app. From then on, she made this her full-time career, completely abandoning any thought of working outside again. Since being discharged from the hospital, she has been living with Dylan. Everleigh's family came looking for her twice, but each visit ended unhappily, and later they were directly turned away at the door by Dylan. The household hired a nanny, and Rachel occasionally goes to the company to deliver meals to Dylan. These moments are always the happiest for the employees, because seeing the boss's wife makes the boss's temper cool down. On this day, Rachel finished writing the ending of this story and, seeing there was still time, prepared to go to the company to deliver a meal to Dylan. During this period, Dylan has been exceptionally busy, working overtime continuously. By the time he returns home each day, Rachel has long since fallen asleep, and she's often half awakened by the movement of the late returning Dylan pulling her into his arms. In the morning, seeing the phone reminder about not forgetting breakfast, she knew he had already left for the office again. Come to think of it, it had been quite some time since they last had a proper meal together. Upon arriving at the company, Rachel took the private elevator directly to Dylan's office. "Mr. Dylan is with a guest, let me inform him." "No need to trouble yourself, I'll go find him." After placing the lunchbox on the office dining table, Rachel began strolling leisurely toward the reception room. The atmosphere in the guest room was somewhat tense. It was Elwyn and Molly, whom she hadn't seen in quite some time. "Rachel is my sister. What right do you have to stop me from seeing her? Facing Elwyn S., Dylan sneered. Sister, you and the Everleigh family never treated her like one. I'm not restricting Rachel's freedom, she's the one who doesn't want to see you. How could that be? There's no way she wouldn't want to see us. We're her beloved family. Dylan realized for the first time that Elwyn could be such a shameless person. In previous meetings, you forced Rachel to accept Molly. Every encounter ended badly, and Rachel would feel upset for days afterward. If you truly considered Rachel family, you should send Molly away and sincerely apologize to Rachel. Hearing this, Molly's tears instantly rolled down her cheeks. Brother Dylan, did Rachel say something about me behind my back? You weren't like this before. How could you say such things and even ask brother to send me away? Facing Molly's pitiful words, Dylan flatly denied everything. Rachel has never said a single bad word about you in front of me. Let alone what you maliciously speculated. On the contrary, it's you who repeatedly tried to shift the conflict onto Rachel. What exactly are you trying to do? Dylan raised his right hand with the ring. I've already proposed to Rachel. From now on, don't say anything that might make her misunderstand. I may have been wrong about what happened before, but Rachel has woken up now. I hope you'll keep your distance from me and, preferably, get the hell out of the Everleigh family for good. If I ever find out you've done anything to Rachel, I swear I'll make you pay. These words left Molly rooted to the spot, too afraid to move for a long while. Rachel pushed the door open and walked in, her gaze sweeping over Elwyn and Molly before quickly looking away, pretending not to see them. Here to bring me food. The moment Rachel appeared, Dylan's domineering attitude toward Elwyn and the others instantly melted away, replaced by tender affection. The assistant said you're in the reception room. Am I interrupting? Dylan hadn't answered yet when a sharp reprimand came from inside the reception room. Rachel, can't you even greet us when you see us? Rachel paused mid-motion before turning to look at Elwyn. Is there any need for greetings? We are your family. Even if you marry Dylan in the future, we will always be your closest family. Rachel didn't respond to his words. Instead, she lifted the skirt covering her legs. This is an injury from the car accident, a scar that nearly runs the length of my thigh, requiring hundreds of stitches. To this day, there's still unabsorbed blood clots in my head, and the scar on the back of my skull can be felt with just a touch of my hand. She pointed out each scar on her body one by one. Dylan stood by her side, his eyes filled with heartache. Are you trying to use these to threaten me? Hearing Elwyn's words, Rachel's eyes were brimming with unconcealable disappointment. Elwyn, I really overestimated you. I never said these things to play the victim, much less to threaten you. I just wanted you and the Everleigh family to realize how terribly wrong you were. It's been over 2 months since I was discharged from the hospital. In all this time, you've only visited me twice, both times just to make me accept Molly, without showing the slightest concern for my injuries or my health. Elwyn, you've truly disappointed me. I'd rather not have family like this. Dylan watched Rachel's pained expression and immediately ordered them to be thrown out. Rachel curled up in Dylan's arms. Dylan, I'm so tired. A tender kiss fell on her forehead and cheeks. Don't think about them anymore. From now on, I'll be your only family, the one who will never abandon you or give up on you. Since you don't want to see them anymore, how about we go traveling? Before the car accident, Rachel had been planning a trip, but the sudden tragedy left her bedridden for 5 years. Since this lifetime has given him the chance, Dylan wanted to make up for all the regrets from his past life. Their first stop was Taormina, Italy, where she and Dylan arrived together. This was the place she had longed to visit ever since watching the movie Melina. Originally, she had planned to come here for her graduation trip, but later, a car accident left me in a coma for 5 years. And this plan was shelved. Now it feels like making up for the regrets of my college years. Taormina is a beautiful island in Italy, known for its stunning scenery and world-famous heart-shaped coastline. Upon first arriving in Taormina, the town's vibrancy and liveliness immediately enveloped me. The streets were bustling with tourists coming and going, the air filled with the aroma of delicious food. Rachel and Dylan strolled hand in hand along the medieval-style streets, the cobblestone path beneath their feet seemingly whispering tales of old. On either side of the road, yellow houses stood in picturesque disorder, their warm glow shimmering under the sunlight. She paused from time to time to admire the small shops along the street, their exquisite handicrafts and unique merchandise making it hard for her to put them down. Walking along the street, they reached the high ground of the town. Standing here, she gazed down at the entire town and the magnificent sea view, feeling an indescribable awe surge in her heart. In the distance, the famous Isola Bella lay quietly on the waters of Taormina Bay, like a dazzling pearl. The Ionian Sea, merging seamlessly with the sky, shimmered under the sunlight, its sparkling waves complementing the blue sky and white clouds, a beauty so breathtaking it stole one's breath away. Rachel closed her eyes, feeling the salty sea breeze brush against her cheeks. As if all her worries had been carried away by the wind. "Dylan, will you stay with me like this for the rest of our lives?" Dylan took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "Of course, I'll only love you for the rest of my life." Rachel listened to his answer and flashed a faint smile. "Did you ever have feelings for Molly?" Dylan froze for a moment before finally speaking. "You heard everything outside the reception room that day." Rachel nodded while gazing at the distant sea. Dylan didn't know how to answer that question. He had indeed loved Molly. She and Rachel were completely different types of people. She was resolute and stubborn, fiercely persistent about things she believed in. She would also express her love openly. If Rachel's love was a whisper between lovers, then Molly's love was fireworks exploding across the sky. Dylan was indeed drawn to her and truly moved by her. In his past life, it was for this very reason that he had hurt Rachel so many times. From his silence, Rachel seemed to already know the answer. After what felt like an eternity, Rachel finally whispered almost inaudibly, "It's okay, as long as you love me now, that's enough." Dylan let out a heavy sigh of relief and immediately pressed his lips against Rachel's. The passionate kiss spoke of love, and also of regrets from their past life. "Rachel, I love you, I swear on my life. I will love you for a lifetime." In the afternoon, the couple arrived at the 300-year-old ancient Greek theatre. This theatre built beside the cliff resembles a bird's nest suspended between sea and sky. Entering the theatre and sitting on the ancient seats, as the wind blows by, one can almost hear voices from 1,000 years ago. From the theatre's highest point, the foreground shows the weathered ruins of the ancient theatre. The middle ground reveals a medieval town halfway up the mountain with its hilltop castle, while the distant view encompasses the sea below and the volcano beyond. The two sat quietly, immersed in this magnificent scenery, imagining the spectacular performances that once took place here a millennium ago. The sunlight bathed the beach, making the white sand shimmer with golden radiance. Rachel took off her shoes and strolled along the shore, feeling the fine sand slip between her toes. Dylan carried her shoes while carefully supporting her with one hand, reminding her to watch out for seashells and pebbles underfoot. By the seaside, many people were sunbathing, swimming, and surfing, their faces beaming with joyful smiles. The two kept traveling at a leisurely pace, staying in cities they liked for a while before embarking on new journeys when they grew restless. 2 months passed quickly. Dylan's company had accumulated a lot of work. Rachel was also being urged by her readers to start drawing a new comic, and only then did the two reluctantly pull themselves away from their travels. That day, Rachel went as usual to Dylan's company, planning to have lunch with him, but before she could even approach the entrance of Ford Corporation, she was stopped by Mrs. Everleigh. Dylan had mentioned to Rachel that he was currently competing with the Everleigh family for some projects. The Everleigh family was originally an established company, but in recent years, they haven't had any opportunities for transformation, and their business has remained lukewarm. Dylan initially looked after the Everleigh family out of respect for Rachel, but now that Rachel is preparing to sever ties with the Everleigh family, Dylan naturally won't continue to support them as he did before. Seeing Mrs. Everleigh's slightly disheveled appearance before her, Rachel guessed that the Everleigh family must be facing a rather serious crisis. "Rachel, Mom knows she was wrong. Will you come home with me?" As if afraid Rachel might refuse, Mrs. Everleigh continued, "Your father, brother, and I have realized our mistake. We've decided to send Molly away in a few days. She'll never appear before us again. Please forgive me this once, won't you?" Though she knew it was because of the Everleigh family that she had come to seek her out and say these words, but after all, this was the mother who had given birth to and raised her for over 20 years. Rachel still couldn't bear to speak harshly, merely brushing her hand away lightly. "Let's discuss these matters after you've sent Molly away." With that, she turned and left without another word. Dylan had just turned a corner when he saw Rachel walking toward him. "Rachel, I've missed you so much." With that, he pulled her into a tight embrace. Rachel couldn't quite understand why Dylan had become so clingy ever since she was discharged from the hospital. He'd get particularly irritable if he woke up and didn't see her, as if he was constantly worried she might leave. "Let's go eat. I'm relatively free these days. I'll spend every day with you." "Okay, At the foot of the Ford Corporation building, Molly, who had secretly followed Mrs. Everleigh, overheard their plan to send her away because of Rachel. A surge of overwhelming resentment instantly welled up in her heart. After what felt like an eternity, she spotted Rachel emerging from the building. As if possessed, she trailed after her. Seeing Rachel's carefree demeanor while she herself was in such a wretched state, a wave of fury suddenly consumed her. "Rachel, it's all because of you. Why did you have to wake up? Wouldn't it have been better if you just died?" With a deranged expression, she then accelerated and rammed straight into Rachel. Working in the office, Dylan felt uneasy. He should have asked Rachel to stay with him earlier. She had just left, and he already missed her terribly. He picked up his phone and called Rachel. "Rachel, Come back and stay with. Are you this person's family? She was hit by a car. There's so much blood. Over here. Come quickly. Dylan's words were abruptly cut off by an unfamiliar voice on the phone. A car accident. Rachel, why would there be a car accident? Even though he had changed events from his previous life, why was Rachel still facing such dangers? Distraught, Dylan left the company in a frantic rush, his face pale with panic. Arriving at the crash site and seeing Rachel lying in a pool of blood, Dylan nearly broke down. Gently touching her face, he called her name. Rachel, wake up and look at me. He cried his heart out. The ambulance finally arrived and took Rachel to the hospital. Dylan, waiting anxiously outside the emergency room, was so distraught he didn't even react when the police approached him. It wasn't until the police mentioned Molly's name that he snapped back to reality. It's been a month since the car accident. Molly was sent to prison. The plans against the Everleigh family have all been wrapped up. The Everleigh family has declared bankruptcy, but Rachel still hasn't woken up. Rachel, you've been asleep for a month. Why won't you wake up? I miss you so much. Suddenly, he felt a faint movement in the hand he was holding. He immediately quieted down and stared intently at Rachel's hand in his palm. It moved. It really moved. Overjoyed to tears, Dylan hurriedly called for the doctor. After a flurry of chaotic activity, Rachel fully woke up. Though still weak from just regaining consciousness, she soon fell asleep again. Immersed in immense joy, Dylan didn't notice the look in the eyes of the awakened Rachel as she gazed at him. For the following period, he stayed by Rachel's side without leaving even a step, accompanying her through rehabilitation, refusing to part from her unless absolutely necessary. Rachel had been unusually silent since waking up, spending her days in a daze, completely ignoring the ever-chattering Dylan by her side. Dylan noticed the odd behavior but assumed it was due to her incomplete recovery and didn't dwell on it. A few days before Rachel fully recovered, she began finding various excuses to send Dylan away. At first, he feared she might vanish the moment he returned. But each time he came back, Rachel would be waiting obediently. Gradually, his worries eased. That day Rachel once again mentioned wanting to eat the wontons from the north side of town and the corn cakes from the south side. Dylan didn't think much of it and drove off to buy them. Today, while out shopping, Dylan for some reason felt an inexplicable unease. Just like the day Rachel got into the car accident, his heart was racing uncontrollably. He took out his phone and called Rachel. Sorry. The number you have dialed is currently switched off. The automated voice message from the phone confirmed Dylan's worst fears, and he immediately turned the car around to rush back home. I ran through countless red lights along the way, and upon arriving home, I abandoned the car without even turning off the engine. Rushing straight into the house was empty. After searching every room in the villa, there was no sign of Rachel. His panic was confirmed once again. On the coffee table in the living room lay Rachel's phone and a letter. Dylan slowly opened it. Dylan, I had a long dream. In it, you, Elwyn, and the Everleigh family had eyes only for Molly. You even tormented me endlessly because of her words. At the end of the dream, I jumped into the icy river without struggle, without regret. After waking up in the hospital, it took me a long time to accept the present that was different from the dream. But I couldn't accept it. I couldn't continue being with you as if nothing had happened, without any reservations. I know you had this dream too, which is why you've been so insecure about me. Writing this, there are so many things I want to say to you, yet it feels like there's nothing left to say. May your future life be safe and healthy, just without me anymore. All the unease I'd felt since reading the letter was answered in this moment. Rachel had also been reborn. Dylan wept uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face. At the peak of his grief, as he fainted, the beeping of medical equipment and the urgent voices of medical staff suddenly echoed in his ears. A sharp pain coursed through his body. When he groggily opened his eyes, he found himself in a hospital emergency room. It was just a dream, but why couldn't even the dream give me a happy ending? Rachel, are you really so unwilling to forgive me? I've come to be with you. As Dylan's final tear fell, the heart monitor emitted a piercing alarm. The once rhythmic waveform, as if pulled taut by an invisible hand, suddenly straightened into a glaring flat line.